welcome everybody to successful interviewing, which is part of our Life After College series. It looks like a lot of you, I see a lot of familiar faces. Just be sure that you've signed in and that you've got your passport stamped. And again, a reminder that if you attend 3 workshop series, you get this great portfolio for free on Friday. You go over to the Alumni Center and pick it up. Or see us in the Center for Current Calling. You can pick them up. Are we picking them up there as well? Anyway, if you can get to the Alumni Center on Friday, that's where they'll be distributed, and probably Monday as well. So, a recent survey by the Seattle Times, they surveyed 100 employers, and 100 employers, and they shared that 99% of the recent college grads that they interviewed were not prepared for the interview. And 2/3 of them were not able to succinctly describe why they were the right fit for the job they're interviewing for. So we are really fortunate to have Margaret Nichols here to present on successful interviewing strategies. And she is a career counselor at Bellevue College. She also has private practice. She's worked in the community, working with community people as well as college students and recent grads, helping them with interview strategies, job search strategies, how to really harness your LinkedIn profile and utilize it, identifying your strengths. She has a master's in counseling from DePaul University, and she's a licensed mental health counselor. So we're really fortunate to have Margaret here. And with that, I want to present her.
Thank you, Patty. Well, good morning. I'm so happy to be here. We didn't anticipate this many people. I was thinking more like 20. So we have a PowerPoint. We had 20 copies of that, and then 20 copies of a one-sheet handout that has the same information, and then something called a 30-second commercial, which I was going to have you fill out. But since we don't have enough copies, I think I'll go to the very end of the presentation because it's listed at the very end, I believe. There it is. No, that's not it. Let's see. Maybe it's not. Hold on. Let's see. Yes, there we go. There it is. So if you don't have a handout like this, let's just start with this at the very beginning. So whatever piece of paper you have, what I'd like you to do, what's the first question they always ask in an interview? Tell me about yourself. So what I'd like you to do, just on a piece of paper, if you have the handout, great. If not, on a blank piece of paper, just fill that in. Take about 2 minutes to fill that in. And then I'm going to ask for one volunteer to actually share their 30-second commercial as if they were in an interview. Do you have a question?
Can I get a paper? Yes.
You have none at all?
No.
Okay. Does somebody have some paper that they could share with her? Yeah, just a piece of paper. So do we have someone who'd like to volunteer to do it? Maybe you've had an interview recently or you've practiced your 30-second commercial? Raise your hand high so I can see you. Anybody? Any brave souls? Nobody? I'll do my own then. I'll just show you what it would be like. Oh, you got one? Okay, oh good, very good. Okay, go ahead, go for it. Which one is it? I can't.
Someone interested in volunteering?
Is someone interested in volunteering to do a 30-second? It's just filling in the blanks. Oh, good. Go ahead. Okay, so everybody listen now. So she's going to do her 30-second commercial. So if I said to you, you were interviewing, and I said, well, tell me about yourself, this is what you'd say.
My name is Kristen Schmidt. Most recently, I worked for the Center for Current Calling, and I attend Seattle Pacific University right now. I'm majoring in communications with a minor in business. A recent accomplishment I am proud of is the marketing campaign that I put on for the CCC. I am a strong communicator, and I enjoy a lot of outdoor activities such as climbing and backpacking. My goal is to work for an outdoor apparel company where I can contribute in solid ways such as marketing and outdoor apparel experience.
Okay, She did that in 30 seconds. Yay! That was really good. That was really good. And she actually did it in 30 seconds. And did you learn a lot about her? That she works in the Center for Career Calling. She's an excellent communicator. She knows what she wants to do in the future. That was pretty good, wasn't it? So that's the kind of thing you want to write down using that format. It's in your PowerPoint. I know some of you didn't get the PowerPoint, but Patty and Karen are both going to work to get that on the website. But this is a really good format. We use it at Bellevue College all the time when we have recruiters come in and practice with the students. And they said this format is the best because it's short, succinct, and it gives you all the information you need. If you give too much information, the person who's listening can't remember it all. And too little, they'll be kind of left wanting more. But this is kind of right in the middle. So if you don't have a copy, go ahead and download that when it's on the website. So that's usually the first question, okay, that they ask in an interview. The other thing you want to do ahead of time, and we'll get to this a little later because I want to go through the content, is do what's called a SWOT analysis on yourself. Does anyone know what a SWOT analysis is and where it came from? Like if maybe you've taken a marketing class? Yeah.
Primarily used in marketing, just like when you look at a company, you look at the exactly strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and so.
Exactly.
I can see how it would be helpful on an individual basis.
And what's your name?
Megan Wolford.
So Megan just mentioned that it's used, thanks, that it's used for marketing a lot to launch a product. So in this case, you're the product. And that's another thing that we can take from the world of business that's normally not taught in a career class, to think of yourself as a product because you truly are. And on your own, just to take some time and just write out what are your strengths, what are the areas that you feel you want to work on, what are your opportunities, and what that means is it's the same as your brand. What's unique about you? What's an opportunity about you that would cause you to be selected over another candidate? And the last thing is threats, and that means what's an old habit or a pattern that you want to watch out for because you know if you repeat that pattern, it won't be helpful. Okay? So does that make sense? You would just write that out. You could journal on it. You could just fill it out on a piece of paper and just write adjectives for each one. And that way, when you're in an interview, you'll know to talk about your strengths. Sometimes they do say, like, tell me about a time when you had a failure on the job or you had a failure in an internship or work study. You can talk about that in weakness, but we always turn it around into a positive. Opportunities, that's really important because that's your brand. And the threat, you just keep that to yourself. That's just something you know about you that's a habit or a pattern that you are consciously working on. So does that make sense? So those are two tools that you can use and take away today. You could do both of those like in 10 minutes, and that alone would get you ready for an interview at the initial level or for an informational meeting, which is just as important. How many of you have ever done informational meetings where you went into an employer and you simply asked about the business, what they did, what their career was like, what it's like to work there, the culture of the company? So raise your hand if you've ever done an informational meeting. Oh, good. A lot of people have, because those are very valuable. In fact, I suggest that when you're starting to look for a job, when you're done with school here, the first thing you do is about 10 informational meetings with different employers all over Puget Sound. Figure out what you'd like to do, pick some small, medium, and large. And one of the best ways to find those people are through friends, family members, and also LinkedIn. So how many people have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile with their picture, a summary statement, their resume, and endorsements? Raise your hand. Oh, you guys are good. I think you, Karen, you've been preparing them well. That's good. Okay, because it really is a marketing campaign. It really is. I worked in outplacement for years with senior executives, and it's the same as this. It's the same process. You're creating a self-marketing plan, and you have to be very intentional about it, or else you'll land in the wrong job. And we always want to find the right job for us at the right level, working for the right employer in the right culture. That's not easy to find. So you have to be very intentional. Talk to lots of people. I have never in my life gotten a job without doing informational meetings. I've always gone ahead and found out about the company, found out about who works there. I would never just walk in blindly to a company because I need to know something about it so that it truly is a good fit. So does that make sense? Okay, so that's where we are with that. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and we'll just go through it here, step by step. So that's me. I work at Bellevue College, and I worked in outplacement for about 20 years. Okay, here's the other thing that's really important. And some of this I'm just giving you the tools. You'll have to go home and do the due diligence on this because we don't have time to do it now, but it's really important when you're preparing for an interview to write out your success stories, because about 80% of interviews use behaviorally based interview questions. How many people know what those are? Behaviorally based interview questions. Okay, just a few, not as many hands went up. Okay, what it is it's not tell me about yourself. That's the 30-second commercial. It's tell me about a time when you encountered a problem. What did you do? Map out the steps for me, and what was the result? If you try to wing that, it won't work very well. But if you have about 20 success stories that you've written down, not memorized, but read pretty thoroughly before you go on an interview or even an informational meeting, you'll be able to talk about pretty much any question they ask. Okay, so can somebody give me an example of when they had something on the job where they had a conflict on the job? Would someone like to just walk through that process where you just describe the situation, the steps, and what was the result? Anybody? That's a harder one than the 30-second commercial because I don't give you a script. Can somebody, okay, go ahead. What's your name first?
My name is Tiffany.
Tiffany, I'm so glad you volunteered. Thank you.
This is one I've been working on a while, so
Okay.
it's probably not, it's still in work. But,
Okay.
Then my first job was at Argosy Cruises, and I was a member of the guest services crew there. And one of the duties we have is selling photos after people are coming off the boat. And you're usually paired up for this so that one person is selling and one person is barking or telling the information about the photos. And I noticed that my partner, who at the time was barking, was not following the proper format for barking and was actually putting more strain on me because I had to do both functions at the same time. So when the lull came, I pulled her aside and had a short conversation with her about how it was frustrating for me to have this relationship that it's supposed to be two people working together with separate duties that are symbiotically related, but that I felt that she wasn't doing it, and if she could keep that in mind for the next push through people. So after that, she said okay, and apologized. And then the results were that we were able to finish that shift. We sold more photos, and then in addition to selling those photos, our relationship as coworkers was improved because of that communication.
Excellent, thank you. That was really good. That was a really good example. Had a conflict, you felt you had to kind of, express how you felt about it, but in a professional way, that you both needed to take equal responsibility, and the result was that she heard you and she got it, and you were able to sell even more of the photos. So that's a really good example. So do you get the idea? Now, if Tiffany was to write down about 20 of those and practice it ahead of time, she did great, but it would flow even more smoothly and be a little more succinct because she practiced it ahead of time. Right now, we just did a cold thing. But if she had practiced that ahead of time and I asked her that same question, she would have had it absolutely step by step. She would have known to describe it, what the two of you did, and what the outcome was. So that's perfect. But if you don't practice it ahead of time, it's more difficult, okay? Because when you're interviewing, you want to appear very authentic. I don't want you to ever think you should be anything other than you are, because if they don't like you and you don't like them, it's a bad fit and you don't want to work there anyway. So you should always be yourself, but you should be extremely prepared, okay? And doing the SARs will make you feel extremely confident. If you have that, the SWOT analysis, and your 30-second, you should be ready to go. The only other thing you have to do is research the company really well. And if you can do some informational meetings on that company with people that work there ahead of time, that would be great, because then you have more of an insider's knowledge of their culture, what their expectations are, the kind of people that work there, anything, because it's a competitive job market. And you don't want to just settle for any job. We have people that come through Bellevue College every day through the Center for Career Connections. They have master's degrees, some of them. And they're working at positions they shouldn't be in because they took a job, They took a survival job, and now they're stuck in it because they don't have enough time to do the informational meetings and the due diligence to look for a better job because they're working full time. So you guys are like just finishing up. This is the time to really do the due diligence. Because the more you put, it's like anything else, the more you invest in yourself, the better the outcome most likely will be. There's no guarantee it's still a numbers game, right? It's a numbers game. The more people you get in front of, the better your chance of getting a referral to the right fit. But if you're intentional about it and very prepared, then that's kind of like your brand. Remember we talked about the SWOT? It's like the opportunity, the brand, because you're getting yourself out there and you're actually knowing very well who you are in relation to other candidates so you can articulate that. Does that make sense? Okay, and remember, all this will be on the website, so you don't have to remember any of this. You can go back to it. Okay, so now I'm going to go back, and actually, I'm gonna leave that. I was going to have us do one of these, but I think I'm not. I'm just going to, because Tiffany was great, I'm just going to keep moving on after that. Okay, because you got the idea, and she did a good example. Okay, now, this is very important. Remember, we're selling ourselves. Has anybody in here had like a paid professional, like a consultative sales job in their career ever? Raise your hand if you've ever been like a paid consultative, like business-to-business salesperson. Anybody? How about just sales in general, retail? Okay, what was it like? What did you feel the strengths were that a salesperson who was really good had? Oh, and first, what's your name?
Raquel.
Raquel? Okay.
Good salespeople are really sociable and
Right,
friendly, and then they also just suggested a ton of things.
right.
And they had goals for themselves.
Right. Good. So that's all really good. And they also ask good questions.
Yeah.
That's really part of the interview, too, that when they say to you, well, do you have questions for me? Have them all prepared ahead of time so you're asking good questions. Or sometimes they ask you, as you're going through the interview, what else would you like to know? Like you may give a response and they may think, well, maybe there's more she wants to know. They'll ask you during the interview if you have questions about different topics. So have your questions prepared ahead of time. Be very professional, like you said, very open and communicative. And the other thing that's really good, have you heard of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming? Neuro-Linguistic Programming. I just took a class on it, and I had studied it years ago. And I took a class on how it relates to job interviews. And the way it relates is there's one concept in NLP called mirroring. And what you want to do, it's totally unconscious on the part of the interviewer and very conscious on the part of the interviewee. And that is you simply mirror the person. So if we were interviewing and you had your hands like that, I would probably do the same thing, but not all the time. I would just do it occasionally because it's very subtle. Or if I'm noticing your hands are like this, I might do this for a while too and kind of lean back and might share. But I would mirror the other person. And why do you think I would do that? Anybody have an idea? Why would I mirror? Go ahead. What's your name first? What's your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth,
Isn't
okay.
it because people tend to hire people who like act like themselves? So if you're like a mirror image, they'll be like, oh, I can kind of see like qualities in them, the way they act that are familiar to me, and so they'd be more comfortable with you.
Exactly. So if you're mirroring them, they're unconsciously feeling slightly more comfortable with you and closer to you, but they're not thinking it. They're just feeling it on an emotional level. And who do people hire? They hire other people that they're comfortable with. So if they're a slow talker, slow down your speech. If they're very expressive and a fast talker, amp it up a little. And you don't want to be anything other than yourself, but you do want to mirror them. And it's subtle. It's very subtle. But you want to be very aware of their energy as you're talking with them. Make good eye contact, lean in, and be very aware of who you're talking to. Because the more you can absolutely connect with them, person to person, you have a better chance of getting a second interview. This is hard to do in a group interview. That's where it falls apart. And sometimes like for government jobs or agency jobs, it'll be you and 6 people. And they'll all be asking you questions and they'll be writing down the responses. That's a little harder. But even then, if you can, try to mirror each person. Like when they ask you a question, before you respond, take a few seconds, look at the person, notice them, and speak to that person alone in the group interview. And then go on. So you don't have to do like when you're doing a presentation where you're supposed to look all the way around the room. Don't do that. Do the opposite. Whoever asks you the question, hone in on them. Because that's your chance to create rapport. So these are all little subtleties, but they work really well because all you need to do is land one good job, right? So you have to do everything you can to get there. Okay. Here's another thing that I suggest you don't do. A lot of times on their resume, people list their references right on their resume. That's a bad idea because it has personal information about your references and you don't want to overuse them. So that should be on a separate sheet of paper. When you go for your informational meeting or your interview, drive by a few days ahead or talk to someone that works there and notice the way they dress. Dress the same way, or maybe just slightly above. Okay, you want to go get there early, do the positive self-talk thing, you know, the affirmations, and try to get relaxed. Several copies of your resume, because it could be a group interview and you didn't know that, and they'll ask for more copies, so have that. Look your best, because if you look your best, you feel really good, right? If your hair's done, your nails are done, you feel great. Okay? Guys, if they're wearing a new shirt, you know, and they're just feeling good, you know. So you want to look your best, because that's important. And it helps a little bit. Every little thing helps. It all works together. It's a holistic gestalt. It all comes together. Have your list of questions. Remember we talked about that. You have to have your list, because if you don't have good questions, they'll think you're not interested in the job, so they're just going to move on. Very important. I've interviewed people where they did everything right, but then they didn't have any good questions at the end. And I thought, well, they didn't do any due diligence. They're just here. They're winging this. They were just really good at it. So I'm not interested. Okay? Strong and confident, friendly. You can even be funny, but just a little bit funny. Not over the top funny. You can make a joke or whatever, but just don't overdo it. And because sometimes people have come back and they told me how their interviews went, and I thought, oh, I overcoached them. They did a little too much. Just, you know, who you are, okay? Strong, confident, friendly. You can be a little bit funny. Definitely empathic. You want to listen really well, make the good eye contact, pick up on their energy level, notice their body language, and be prepared for just about anything. Like I said, the hardest interviews are the group ones, because you have to match 6 different people's personalities. Here again, it can be done, but it's a little harder, because you're trying to answer the question and match their energy level. But it can be done, and the more interviews you go on, the better. So anyway, so questions at this point before we move on? Do you have questions? Just raise your hand really high so I can see you. Anything? Okay, go ahead.
On confidence, what if we are like generically not a super confident person as far as like selling myself? And, like,
Right.
yeah, if you want me, how do we speak confidently, like our skills and qualifications, but not like be a phony like muscle man?
Right. We actually have a class on that, interviewing and marketing skills for introverts. At the college, we have that. And that's probably when you should all sign up if you're an introvert, because there's a lot of people out there that are. And there's nothing wrong with being an introvert or an extrovert. What is, okay? But when you're looking for a job, it's more useful to be extroverted, okay? You can always go back to your personality style after you land the job. That's the way I look at it. You can always go back, you know. But, I mean, you do what you got to do in this world, right? So the way you do that is, for the introverts, I found, because I usually have them like debrief, they come in after the interview and I ask them how it went, for the introverts, especially after they take the class. The successful ones have over-prepared. So they have written out their 20 success stories. They worked with their mom or their dad on their 30-second commercial. They know their SWOT upside down. And they're just ready to go. So because they get nervous, because they're introverts, they're not as nervous because they're over-prepared. And many times introverts, not always, this is just in general, tend to be a little more detail-oriented and specific, so that goes in their favor because they're really prepared. So that, and then they come across as just calm. You know, a little slower speaking, calm, a little more inner focus, but that's good. Depends on what the job is, you know. So think of it that way. Go ahead. Yeah.
Regarding the 30-second commercial,
Yeah.
it says, I most recently worked at blank.
Right.
So, currently I work at the university doing a couple of things. They're not related to what I want to do. So I want to work in a museum. So if I'm interviewing for an internship or a job in a museum, should I lead with my most relevant experience? I was an intern at the Museum of History and Industry, or my most recent? Like, what do I lead with so that they remember the best?
Lead with the relevant information.
Okay.
Remember, you want to make the interview easy for them. You want to make it easy for them to connect the dots. So feed them what they need to know and only what they need to know. And what's your name again?
Hannah.
Hannah. Thank you, Hannah, because that's a really good point Hannah made. When you're answering a question, just answer the question. Don't give them any additional information. If they look a little puzzled or whatever, they'll ask you more, or you can even say, have I answered your question completely? But don't go on and on. Just answer the question, and then watch their body language. Karen.
For students, I think the first line on the 30-second might include what they're studying.
Yes,
not
right.
just where they work.
Okay, so yeah, because they may not be working right now. So you might say, I'm Mary Smith, I'm at SPU, I'm a current student in the nursing program. So that would be the beginning right there, because you're focusing in on your studies. It's not a job, because maybe you don't have a job. And maybe you haven't for several years because you've been in school. So that's fine, just wherever you are, okay? But if let's say you're a nursing student and you're not done with school yet, but you want to get a job in sales in the evening, then talk about something else. Not nursing, but whatever you're doing that's related to sales or whatever it is, okay? So introverts do really well in interviews because they're so thoughtful and they answer the questions so completely and they're so specific. The only place where they fall down is they give too long of answers sometimes. But if you prepare your SARs ahead of time, it won't be too long. Because the SARs should be a minute or less, if you can make them, a minute or less. And your intro, tell me about yourself, is 30 seconds. So err on the side of brevity. When I used to do interviews, I figured they gave me a certain amount of information, and I'm glad they kept it short, because then that gave me a chance to do a follow-up question. I could say, well, tell me more about your nursing program, that kind of thing. Get the idea? They'll ask you questions. But if you give them too long of an answer, they get discouraged sometimes, so they'll skip questions because they only have a certain amount of time to interview you. Okay? So we did all this. We kind of focused here a little bit because that's an important one. So let's keep going here. And I talked about this. Hey, we're ahead of the game here. Hey, I'm talking pretty fast. But that means there'll be more time for questions. Did I mention everything there? Yeah? Did I do all that? Important to smile because, they'll smile back. Okay. This is the hard one, those group interviews. Remember, ask if you answered their question completely because you'll have all these different personalities. The other thing they do in group interviews, like for agency work or government work, they have to ask the exact same, or Boeing does this a lot because they do agency work and contracts. They have to ask the exact same question of each candidate. They have to fill out the form completely, no blanks. So when you're answering the question, they're writing the whole time, and they're not making any eye contact. So what do you think you should do in that case?
Pause.
What's that?
Pause.
Pause, okay. You can pause. You can also watch when they stop writing, because maybe, like say you answer a question and they didn't write very much, and on the other answers they wrote a lot. Then you could say, is there more you'd like to know about that? And they'll sometimes they're not allowed to do follow-on questions, but sometimes they'll say, well, could you tell me more about your experience in such and such? So watch their body language. If they're writing and writing and writing, that means you're giving the right answer. If they just wrote a few notes and then look up at you, that means you did not answer the question completely. So I would just say, would you like me to tell you more about? And then they'll usually nod, or they'll sometimes even give you a little hint about what they're looking for. They'll say, well, tell me more about your education, or tell me more about the specific courses you took in nursing, or tell me about your internship, whatever it is. But so here again, we're just going to look for cues in body language, and in group interviews, it's the writing, okay? But they can't give you too much of a lead on anything because they have to ask the exact same questions of each person. So you're going to have to watch them. Okay, and like we said, it's good to pause before answering a question because that, is good because you're thinking it through, you're not just rambling. It'll help with nerves as well. But bottom line, these interviews are stressful. They're the most stressful. They use them a lot at Microsoft too, and at Boeing, for internships, for full-time jobs. Anybody ever had one of these kind of interviews that they could tell us about? Raise your hand. Go ahead. What's your name?
Zoe.
Zoe, okay.
They do it for the nursing program here at SPU. It's usually you have 3 or 4 people interviewing you, and then there's, I think in my group there was 5 of us being interviewed, and it just goes around.
Right. Did they ask the same question of all 5 of you?
No, we each
Okay.
had like a person asking us. They would like switch off, so you got a question from each person, and they all had like a list of several different questions. So nobody repeated the same one.
Good. That's actually better in some ways, because if you have to do the same answer, then you're trying to up the response of the person before you. So it's actually better to have separate questions. And you can kind of watch the other person, kind of be composing yourself, doing the positive self-talk as you're listening, but also listening to the person that's answering. And, just be yourself. But those are hard interviews. Yeah?
I have a question. Is it common in a group interview? I haven't done a lot, but for maybe the interviewer to throw out a discussion topic and see how kind of an open-ended question of what do you guys all think of this industry, and then how do you really balance trying to cut someone off or give you the appropriate response.
Yeah, they do. I just saw that in an airline interview. I was at an airline interview a couple of weeks ago, and they did that. They had one question, and there were like 15 people in a circle, and each person had to chime in.
Right.
And it didn't go around robin, so if you didn't say anything, you just didn't contribute.
Right.
And you had to contribute something original and kind of follow on to the person before you, so you had to listen really carefully. So that requires even more skill. So, but it happens a lot.
Okay.
And you know, sometimes you won't say anything because you have nothing to contribute. Just wait for the next question. You'll get your turn, but just make sure you take a turn, or otherwise they will observe that and they'll note that you were non-interactive. So that'll go against you. Go ahead.
To be accepted to the education department at SPU, there's an interview which involves teaching a lesson to a group and then doing a group interview, so it's one interviewer with 6 of you in the room.
Yes.
And at least the one I was in, I can't speak to how other people conduct it. He asked a general question, and we all answered, and as soon as we started, we established an order that everyone answered in.
You guys did.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we just got to happen, and so because of how I am, I think I was first or second in the way that we answered,
Right.
but we always answered in the same order, but it wasn't in circular order.
Right. But you
But
were a little
asked
more
one
forthcoming.
question and
Right.
everyone
Yeah.
did the same question.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of hard for the last person.
That's
Because everything's been said.
said.
So you're smart to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but the last person is, what are they going to add, you know, at that point? Yeah, interesting. So it's interesting how people form patterns, you know, it's very interesting. So those are the hardest interviews. So it's easier to do the one-on-one. The best thing I would suggest is practice for interviewing ahead of time. Besides the SARS and the 30 seconds, go to some informational meetings. It's not that hard to set them up. I do it all the time. I help students do it all the time. I literally have them sit in my office with a script. I give them a really simple script. They get on the phone and they set up informational meetings. A lot of times it's a cold call from their connections on LinkedIn. They ask one of their friends to do an electronic introduction. The person says, yes, I will talk with Mary. Then you know, he or she calls that person and sets up a time, and I help them set up the appointment. And then they're on their own at that point. Then they have to come up with their questions to ask the person. And they have to research the person. Everything on LinkedIn, it tells everything. It tells you where they went to school, their resume, there's a picture, the associations they belong to, clubs. Sometimes there's attachments, all kinds of stuff. You can find out so much about people on LinkedIn. So you need to get on LinkedIn, have a very professional profile, and start using it to research people for informational meetings. And what's the worst thing? A friend has done an electronic introduction, then you follow up, you call, and they say they don't have time. So what? You know, you just move on to the next person. It really is a numbers game. And introverts do this even better than extroverts in some ways because they're over-prepared. Again, remember? They're over-prepared. I think everybody should over-prepare. But it just seems more natural that the introverts over-prepare. I did a class the other day on the Myers-Briggs, and it was so funny. I had them come in, and I had the extroverts sit at one table, and the introverts sit at the other table, and the extroverts all got there late. They had a cup of coffee. They were talking like crazy. They didn't have any paper or pen. They were borrowing paper from each other. The introverts got there early. They had their coffee. They had their notebook out. They had their laptops ready to go, and they were not talking. And they were just, it was so funny. I laughed so hard because it was so obvious. I said, so I don't even have to teach this class. Voila, there it is. Extrovert, introvert, see? And it was so fun. And I had only done that once. I just thought, I'm going to experiment and just see if that's really true. And I was laughing so hard because it was really funny to see, you know, how they came in. It was hysterical. Because extroverts, they're in the moment. They're real spontaneous, whatever. Introverts, they feel safer by being over-prepared. So there you have it, okay? And there's no right or wrong. What you are is, what is. Okay? Any other questions on that? And then we'll keep going here. That we did. Oh, as the interview draws to a close, very important. Same for informational meetings. We want to, in an interview, we want to, like, in sales, it's called closing the deal. And what that means is you want to find out what the next step is. So say it went really well. And they ask you for any questions, and they've answered all your questions, so you're done. So then at that point you say, oh, Mary, I do have one other question, and that is, what's the next step in the process? Will you be calling me? Should I check back in? Is there another interview schedule I need to get on? And then watch the interviewer very carefully for their body language, because they're going to tell you whether or not you're going to get a next step. And you're going to know viscerally as well, because even if they don't say anything, because maybe they have to talk with their supervisor about it. They're going to tell you through their body language if they're interested. So watch them, okay? And also your own sense of how do you feel emotionally with this person? Are you connected? Did you feel like it was successful? And did they give you a next step? If they give you a next step, that's a buying signal. That says, yes, we're really interested. So if they say, yes, I'm going to forward on your resume, and next time you'll be speaking with the hiring manager in the engineering department. At that point, you say, great, thank you so much. Can you tell me who that person would be? Then you look them up on LinkedIn, and you research them. Find out all about them. Make a few phone calls. Are they an introvert or an extrovert? What do they like to do? What are their hobbies? Do you see, when you do all this stuff and the next person doesn't, who's going to get the job? You, because they like you. But it's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work. But it does work. Okay? So anyway, so we got through all that. Reaffirm your interest in the position. Of course, thank the person for taking their time. Also, if it's an informational meeting, thank them. If you have met, like at a Starbucks, pay for their coffee rather than asking them to do that because they've done you a favor. Ask any remaining questions. You know, smile a lot, shake their hand, all that. And like I said, you're going to know on an emotional level how it went. And you know what? Sometimes it's just not a good fit. You don't like them, they don't like you. It just doesn't work. You know, and other times you may like them, they don't, or vice versa. But say you don't like them and they do like you. Don't ever turn down a job offer or act disinterested. Just say, what are the next steps, and smile and nod your head, and then go home and think about it. Who knows? Because you may go to another interview and you find out it's really not the right fit, but they have something else for you, or they're really impressed with you and they'll keep you in their follow-up list to call when there is an opening. So you don't ever want to close the door. Keep it open. Okay, so like I said, if it's meant to be, you'll get a call back. If it's not, it's just a learning experience. The other thing is, how many people in here keep a journal? Raise your hand if you keep a journal. Okay. About a quarter of you do. What I would suggest you do, either in an Excel spreadsheet, if that's easier for you, or just in a notebook or just in a Word document, for each interview, put the interview or the informational meeting, the date, who you met with, and then journal on these 3 questions after it's done. What went well? What did not? And what will I do differently next time? And say over the next 6 months you set up 20 informational meetings. If you answer these questions after each informational meeting, you will become an absolute professional on doing informational meetings, because each time you're going to improve a little bit based on what you did, what you don't want to do, and what you've consciously decided to do differently the next time. Okay? Because interviews, they really are a game. That's all it is. The goal is to get the good job at the right level so you can be of service and do what God put you on earth to do. But in order to get there, you have to play the game. Okay? It's just the way it is. And it's not fair, and it's not right, but it's just the way the world works. Unless you have a good in somewhere where you've done an informational meeting and they basically give you the job. That happens too some of the time. And that's fine. Okay. So, don't forget your nice thank you note. Say it went really well. Say it was an informational meeting and you're in love. You know, I mean, he loved you, you loved him. It's perfect. Then you do a handwritten thank you note on professional stationery. No little thank you cards, nothing cutesy. Just beautiful professional stationery. Thank you. I learned a lot from the informational meeting. I appreciate the fact that you spent the time with me, and it was a great learning experience, sincerely. Okay? That's the best. If it didn't go so well, and you know you're not going to get the job, and it was 6 people and you didn't like any of them, then you just email to everyone. And I'm just joking. You should still send the handwritten note. You never know. One of them might have liked you and you didn't like them, but they have something for you and they're thinking, aha, I'm going to keep that person's resume and forward them on. So in general, handwritten notes, email a thank you note to all the members of a large group interview. Make sure you get everybody's business card so you don't misspell anything. Send it to them. And if it really, really went well, in addition to the handwritten note, just follow up every couple months. Give them interesting information you've learned about the job, maybe an article about their company that's complimentary, just to show that you're still interested. You didn't get the job, but you're staying in touch. Okay? Or you can just type up a nice business letter, just on regular business paper, and mail it to them. You don't have to do the handwritten thing. You just type up a nice letter. Dear so-and-so, thank you so much. 3 paragraphs. Here's what I learned from this. Here's what I'd like to, here's a way I could contribute to your organization. I look forward to talking with you again. Whatever you want to say. Okay? So that's kind of in the middle between the email and the handwritten. And you be the judge of that. You'll know. But you always follow up with a thank you to everyone, no matter what. Even if it went terribly, You still follow up, okay? Because it'll help you bring it to closure, if nothing else. And even in these informational meetings, I've gone on informational meetings where it went really well and I felt the connection, because I do a lot of informational meetings to get leads for internships for our students at Bellevue College. And sometimes they go really well, and sometimes there's just no love there. And they don't want me there, so I still send a nice note, because you never know. Okay? So some will go well, some won't. That's just life. It's a numbers game. Make sure you get their card. Make sure you spell everything right. Okay, we did all this. Make sure, we're not going to do it now because we don't have time, but when you go home, make sure you do all 3 of these, okay? Make sure you really understand your SWOT, your SARS, and your 30-second. Because if you do that, plus your due diligence on the company, you're ready to go for an informational meeting. Okay, that's the first step. Always, I had a guy the other day that came in from Microsoft. He did an informational meeting. Even though he'd worked there for like 20 years, he did informational meetings with managers who he wanted to work for at Microsoft, okay? And he got the job he wanted. So very important to do these. What else we got here? That's me. I'm in private practice and I work at the college. Actually, you can come to the college for a 30-minute consultation free of charge. You don't have to be a student. You can come in for the community. You got your hand raised there? Yeah?
I was wondering if you had any specific tips for phone interviews?
Phone interviews, yes. I do have some specific tips on that. Many times today, especially for technology jobs, the first interview, regardless of your qualifications, is a phone interview. A lot of them are. So what you want to do, you actually have an advantage. Have a pen and paper there, have all your SARS written out ahead of time, have your 30-second written out. You don't want to read it, but you have all your tools in front of you. It will allow you to be more composed and calm on the phone and practice speaking slower than normal. Because when you're on the phone, what are they missing? What are they missing when they're talking to you on the phone? The visual cues, right. So you can't do the NLP. Well, you can do the NLP thing in terms of cadence and pacing of your voice. But you lose a lot, and they're losing a lot on their end too in terms of gathering information about you. So slow down your pace, and you have all your tools spread out in front of you so you can be more confident. So actually, a lot, I'd say maybe 40% of initial interviews now, regardless of industry, are phone interviews. That's the screen. So very important to get past that phone interview. So yeah, be prepared. It's very similar. So that's me, that's my contact information. You can also, and I have cards from the college today too, because like I said, it's a community resource. You do not have to be a student to come in. We have 4 career counselors, they're all good. And we'll help you with LinkedIn, resumes, job search, all that stuff, if you want to do that. Or you can come and see me, and then I do more longer term stuff, which is one-on-one career coaching to help you come up with a complete marketing plan. So that's all for that. What questions do you have? Because there may be things I didn't cover, and we have like 10 minutes left. What are the questions? Go ahead.
Can we talk more about the difference between strengths and opportunities in the SWOT?
Talk more about the difference between strengths and opportunities? Yeah. Okay. Opportunity is more like your brand, okay? I'll just leave it. Opportunities are more like your brand. So it's what sets you apart, what makes you unique. So many people could have the same strengths or core competencies. That's the core competencies for a job description. But your brand is different. It's something extra about you. Like, can you think of an example, someone of where you might have a brand quality that's different from a strength? Go ahead.
A strength being that I'm organized, and a brand being that I speak Spanish. And so that sets me apart in a lot of industries, especially the place I'm located.
That's exactly right. Did you hear that? Her brand is that she speaks Spanish, so she may fit the core competencies of 10 different positions and be a perfect match. But when she's in an interview, beyond the core competencies, which is her strengths, her brand, which is her opportunity, is that she speaks Spanish. So it's like an added edge. And it's very important to know your brand, what sets you apart. Because maybe I need someone, maybe I have a customer service position and I need someone who can speak Spanish 20% of the time to my clientele. If she volunteers that information, I'll hire her because she brings value. Other questions? Go ahead.
For questions at the end of interviews, what would you say are the best questions? Like, tell me more about your company culture, or what is this internship going to be like?
Exactly.
I'm wondering what is the strategy on this.
Exactly. You want to do as much research as you can before you get to the interview. So say you're getting a lot of buying signals, like they want you to talk with someone else and they're talking about start dates, that kind of thing. Then you say, tell me a little bit more about this specific internship. Like, what's a typical day like for me as an intern in the Learning Center here at whatever? And ask them about a typical day. And you might also say, you know, I know you had an intern here last quarter. What made them successful? That kind of a thing. Because they're basically going to tell you what you need to know to be successful.
Can I interrupt just
Sure.
for a second? For those of you that have a 12 o'clock class, you're welcome to leave, but we're going to do Q&A till 12:10.
Yeah.
So
So you have 10
jump
minutes.
up really
Yeah.
fast and leave, but please
Okay.
stay if you have questions.
Right, you have 10 minutes. Bye. Thanks for coming for people who have to leave. Yeah, just wait till they get resettled.
Sign in, please sign in at the, as you go out the door and get your passport stamped.
Okay.
Okay, more questions?
Okay, we have 10 minutes. Now's the time to ask your question. Now, this young lady right here, is it Hannah? Ah, yeah, I remember her name. Hannah's first and then you. Okay, so Hannah, go ahead. Or was it you? Megan.
Oh, I was just wondering if you ask like questions of like what is this internship going to be like? I'm worried that might show that you don't know enough about the position. Like I'm wondering if that's a strategy. Like if I ask too many questions about like the company or the internship, does that show that I haven't done my research?
Okay, Megan has a really good question. Don't ask those specific questions until the very end of the interview when you've gotten the buying signals, because you've already answered all your success stories, so they know your core competencies, they know your strengths. Now all you're doing is adding on additional information by asking these questions. Because they might say, well, we need you to work one-on-one in the media center with students. I noticed we didn't ask you about tutoring. Have you ever been a tutor? Then you can say, well, yes, you know what? I did some tutoring in a work-study program over at Seattle Pacific. And you can add information. So they should be specific questions that when they answer it, you can follow on and sell a little bit more. Get the idea? So whatever questions you ask, know that you're probably going to follow on and add some supporting information that says you're the right candidate. Okay? I'm basically teaching you how to sell. That's what I'm doing. And really good salespeople can do this flawlessly, and it's seamless. Okay? But you want to add the information at the right time, because, Megan, you have a great point. They may think, well, shouldn't she have looked at the job description for this internship? Why is she asking this? You've already sold your qualities, your strengths. Now you're getting into the due diligence. You're asking specific questions that tell you more about the job, and when possible, support it with evidence from your own resume. Get the idea? Okay, you almost can do a diagram ahead of time of exactly the questions you want to ask and how you'll do follow-on questions. That's very sophisticated. Sometimes you'll get a really unsophisticated recruiter who doesn't know how to ask good questions. Then you can control the interview. Did you know that? Sometimes you can, but not in a bad way. You don't want to over-control, but you can position the right evidence about yourself that will just lead them to the conclusion that you're the right fit. Okay, how do you think you might do that? Or has anybody ever had that? That's the type of situation where they weren't too sophisticated and you were able to present whatever information you wanted that supported your candidacy. Nobody ever had that? It's recruiters that don't have any questions written down and they're just like winging it. Sometimes they'll just talk about anything. Whatever you want to talk about. Well, then steer it in the direction of making a fit for you. Like sometimes they're just like really unprepared. They don't ask you the standard questions. They'll just say, oh, well, how did you like working at Boeing? Like what department were you in? Oh, I heard a lot of stuff about that department. Tell me a little more. Sometimes they're just like looking for information, which you don't want to share confidential information, but other times it's completely open-ended interview. You can share whatever you want. It's not very often, it's rare, but I have seen that. Okay? All right, so good questions. So other questions at this point. We've got 8 minutes. Yes?
You said that in an interview you want to not give them information that doesn't pertain to it and just kind of really be specific about what you have that relates to the job. In relation to like your resume as like a young person that probably doesn't have a lot of experience and has had a lot of jobs that have nothing to do with that.
Right.
Like how do you pare down, like do you think it's better to have a small resume with a little bit of experience and like really organized looking, or report to like leave a little bit of things to show that you do have a work history, even if it doesn't really relate? Like how much of that can you get rid of in our
That's a really good question. What I would do is I would look at the job description and whatever core competencies I have, like selling skills, communication skills, research ability, whatever it is, put that in the summary statement at the top of your resume, and then try to talk about that in the interviews. Because you may not be an exact fit, but you have certain core strengths or competencies that relate to the position. And what I like to do is, when I'm at the interview, I have a copy of my resume right in front of me along with copies for the other people, and I can keep referring back to the summary statement, which is at the top of your resume, which is the big picture of who you are. It's like your brand. Keep referring back to you, and you can look down occasionally. The other thing people ask me is, can you take notes during an interview? Yes, you can. You can take notes, but don't overdo it to the point where you slow down the process, because they may not be able to have enough time to ask all the questions. So quick notes to yourself, okay? But yes, that's a really good question. That summary statement is key, because it's like the theme. It's like you're writing a short story, and this is the theme of the whole short story. It's like the middle of a wheel, and there's all these spokes, but it goes back to the hub, which is your summary statement, so you want to keep referring back to it. You want to make it easy for them to remember you and to bridge between what they have as a need and what you can supply. Okay, they have to match. Okay? And practice this. The best way to do this is just to do a lot of informational meetings, because there's nothing on the line. It's not a real job interview. You're asking about them. But when they ask you to tell about yourself, then be ready to go, because they will. If you establish a good rapport, they'll be fascinated. And they'll ask about you. And they'll remember, because you've elicited a visceral response. They responded to you emotionally. That's what you need. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
With the SARS questions, should you just prepare examples of conflicts with other coworkers during the job, or are there other subjects you should prepare for as well?
Oh, Google it. There's tons of different topics. Conflict, how you've demonstrated leadership skills, how you've researched a project, how you've been an unofficial project manager, how you've helped recruit a new person, how you've learned some interesting information about a project that wasn't available. There's all kinds of questions out there. You should have 20 of them. But mainly, they all want to be focused around your core strengths, okay? Because they're going to ask you about that. Tell me about a time when, fill in the blank. But they should be on a variety of questions. And if you just Google that, like typical interview questions, you'll get like 20 typical ones. And what I would do for those 20 typicals is do a SAR for each one. Write it out. Because by writing it out, you're using your head, you're recalling it emotionally, and kinesthetically, you're writing it. So you're hardwiring it into your brain because you're using different modalities. That's part of NLP too. You want to use as many of your senses to hardwire in that response so it becomes automatic. It's like a dancer who does the same dance over and over until after a while it becomes ingrained in their muscle memory. So when they perform and do a dance, it's in their muscle memory. They're not thinking about it. That's the same with your SARS. It should be in your memory muscles. It should be just there and you're ready to go. But it can't sound canned either. Okay, I listened to a speaker the other day, and I could tell he'd done that same talk 100 times because he followed an exact format, and I thought, that's too canned. I mean, it was good, but it was too canned. So it has to be somewhere in the middle, okay? And the only way to do that is practice through informational meetings. I can't emphasize how much the importance is attached to those informational meetings. In fact, I know there's I don't know, was there a class yet on informational meetings? Has it been, or is it tonight? When was it?
Well, it was Monday.
Okay, Monday?
And then we have
Yeah.
somebody.
There is another one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone on networking. So
Yes,
we're-
same thing. I can't overemphasize that because I'll just tell you numbers-wise, we track all of our numbers at the center, the Career Center. I'd say 80% of the people who get good jobs, they've all been doing the due diligence around informational meetings because I ask them how they get the job. Every time they get a job, they have to email me and tell me. And then I say, how did you get the job? And I keep an Excel spreadsheet. Mary did this, Fred did this, Joe did this. They all did. The commonality, I'd say 80% of the time, is informational meetings because they fine-tune their skills. And as an introvert, if they're an introvert, they got over this shyness. And if they're an extrovert, they just got better at being an extrovert. You know, and just got really, I don't want to say slick, but extremely well skilled at it, okay? And even if you're going for a position as a, you know, something really serious and really deep and really like all about research and investigation, they still want to know that you're the right match for their organization on a personal level. And if you can't demonstrate that, you won't get the job. Go ahead, somebody had their hand up. Go ahead, right there.
We talked a little bit about group interviews.
Right.
I have an interview lined lined up for next month, it's gonna be a panel interview.
Yes.
3 or 4 people at a table and me in a chair.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific sort of tips you could give regarding that kind of an interview? I'm not really sure, like, you know, maybe one person asks you a question, will you look at them, or?
Do you know who these panel members are right now? Do you know who's
It's a
going to?
government job, so there might be people that work at the consulate, it might be people that are from overseas, but they're all different, so.
Can you find out who's going to be there? Because then I would say Google them and find out something about each
they're always
person.
different.
It's always different, so you can't Google them and find out too much about them. You can't use LinkedIn. I think you're just going to have to be really prepared with your SARS then and just go with it. But here again, still look at each person. When you answer the question of a particular person on the panel, only look at them. It's like they're the only person in the room and you have all the time in the world to answer their question, although you really don't. But it's just all about them, okay? It's hard. That's a hard one to do. But you'll know when you're done. You'll know if it went well. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
My question was that, well, she might not have seen me.
No, but I like his energy, his friendly energy. I like it. Yeah.
After a couple of interviews, even some work experience, I've really discovered that the interview is just as much about you interviewing them as it is them interviewing you. So a lot of times you'll show up the first week or after you've been there a while, and you realize to yourself, man, this is not what I expected it to be. So I had a question about if the manager you will be working with is interviewing you, what type of questions might you recommend to get a feel for who they are and if they'd be a good fit to work with?
Ask them about the last person who had your job and how they were successful or not. Sometimes they'll say, well, it wasn't a good fit, that's why you're here. And they'll say what didn't work. Or they'll say, oh, Mary was here, she did a work-study program for 6 months, and then she did an internship with us. And I love the fact that she followed through with students and was just so good on customer service. She was really good at listening, and she always got back to me with a problem. She didn't hide it from me. So then you know more about that person. They're more open. Or they might say something like, well, that person was really good at filling out all the forms and making sure everything was detailed, specific, and I didn't have to do much proofreading. So they want someone who's very specific. So whatever they say, just know that's part of the job. And to be successful with that person, you have to match their expectations. And if it's something that's not a good fit, you can't make yourself that. So if it's not, you know, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. It's better to take more time and be more fussy about the right job for you or the right internship than to just go with something. Because like I said, we get all these people that come in all the time who take survivor jobs, and they just circle through the Career Center because 6 months later they don't have a job. They're back going through the same process. So just be really careful.
So I think we're about
Yeah, we're just about out.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's
Thank
give
you.
Margaret